The following audio is via a Skype call.
That's the most fantastic story I've ever heard. How can you make up a thing like that? What do you know about it?
TGIF, it's Mantz and Mitchell with Gary Mantz and Suzanne Mitchell. A double shot of good conversation with great guests to jumpstart your weekend. Mantz and Mitchell, you're on the air.
Thank you, Eric Kramer. Hi, everybody. I'm Gary Mantz.
I'm Suzanne Mitchell.
Together, we are Mantz and Mitchell in your ears for the hour of a Friday. And we're so happy to be working once again with our buddy, bad boy, Benny at the board. That's a lot of B's, and you're a lot of Benny.
You did very well, and like usual on every Friday, we love to have you here. So that's good.
Always good to be there.
Yep.
And I guess it's an extra special occasion when we can bask in the glow of another Seahawks victory, this time on Thursday Night Football. And that was a pretty good game.
Oh, man, it was completely amazing. We finally showed our true colors. Oh, bring in the Hawk. There we go.
Yep. And, of course, at the expense of the Green Bay Packers. That's a rivalry now that's really up there with some of the best in recent memory.
Oh, completely. And our schedules and our records definitely show that. But I think we're playing it in the long run. We don't need to win all 15 games. We can lose a few here and there and still make the playoffs because that's the ultimate game plan.
Yes, absolutely. Be there standing at the end. And the Chicago Bears, thank you, by the way, because that hangs another loss on Green Bay.
Right.
The black and blue division is living up to its reputation,
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Sorry, Suzanne.
So,
It's okay.
why is she sorry?
Because she's a big Bear fan. Not Bears.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, but with the Packers losing, that helps the Bears.
That helps the Bears.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair,
Yay, Bears.
But nobody
Yeah.
needs to explain NFL football to Benny Mathers. He understands. he has the understanding of a wizard. He's got Merlin's sword. But we also have a gentleman by the name of Garnet Schulhauser. And if you get talking sports with this guy, you've got to move from the NFL. And first of all, it would be the Canadian Football League if he has any interest in football at all. But NHL hockey, do not get him started, or metaphysical Q&A is never going to arrive today. That I assure you. That I can tell you. So I'm going to do the following. And Benny, it's just a delight to work with you. If anything, just sticks with you in this conversation, feel free to jump in because you're welcome to do so. You're an old pal by now. But this gentleman who feels like a friend, I've never met him. I hope I do sometime. What is this? Visit number 5?
Yes, it is.
Garnet Schulhauser. We're going to do metaphysical Q&A, which has become a popular term associated with our broadcast. And let me say the following. Garnet Schulhauser is a retired lawyer. Doesn't that sound fine? Retired lawyer, retired. That word
Sounds
alone.
elegant.
That's
Doesn't it?
magical.
Mm-hmm.
He lives near Victoria on Vancouver Island with his wife, Kathy. After practicing corporate law for over 30 years in Calgary with 2 blue-chip law firms, he retired in 2008, and his first book, Dancing on a Stamp, was published in 2012. Since the release of his first book, Garnet has been active with book signing tours and speaking engagements and has been interviewed on well over 100 talk shows broadcast from studios in the U.S., Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia. Pretty much your English-speaking world. It's just a thrill to have him back with us once again so that we can get into whatever is under that umbrella of metaphysics. And some amazing stuff comes from the mouth of this man, Garnet Schulhauser. Welcome, sir. So glad to have you back.
To be here. Thank you for inviting me again. You two are my favorite Q&A questioners.
Ah, we like that. We have the Q's, you have the A's. How's that?
That sounds like a deal.
Sounds good to him. I'm going to throw something at you, Garnet, that I could not have done a couple of weeks ago had we scheduled you earlier. And I would love to get your response by way of opening up a conversation in a free-form manner, which we've gotten accustomed to doing with you, Garnet. Let me tell you a little story. A Scottish medium of renown who was on our show very recently, I think it was 2 Fridays ago, Bill Collar, did a public demonstration here in Sarasota at the church where Suzanne and I are members. In the course of demonstrating his mediumship, he got to telling stories about people for whom he had read and some of the amazing experiences that entailed. One in particular caught my attention. He was at a church elsewhere, and Bill Collar decided to offer a reading. May I come to you, as they say in Lilydale, in spiritualism, that's good manners. May I come to you? And this lady, whom he took to be Polish, he hadn't heard her voice yet, but he looked at her and he just took her to be Polish. And he said, may I come to you? And she said, yes. And he said, I have the impression of you being a lady from Poland, from actual Poland. And she said, yes, that's true. And he said, and particularly, I have the impression that you are from Krakow, in that area of Poland. And she said, Krakow, exactly, that's where I'm from. Well, now he's really warming up. And then he said, and I don't know exactly what this means. Maybe it's just by association, but I feel like I have with me Pope and now Saint John Paul II. I actually have Pope John Paul II with me. He feels like he's here with me. Would that mean anything to you? And she said, yes, he was my uncle. I'm going, what? What? So the niece of the Pope himself is getting this reading, and it's the next part, the last part of what he had to say in regards that had me so fascinated with Bill Collar. He said, what your uncle, what His Holiness is indicating is that when he crossed over, he expected to meet Jesus. I mean, you know, he'd been working for him for a while. And he thought when he died that he was going to go to quote unquote heaven and that Jesus would be there to greet him, that they would be able to interact personally, which was his dearest wish. And he said, the Pope apparently said through Bill, that he was at first disappointed because he said, there's no Jesus. He said, there wasn't a Jesus for me to meet. It's not that he didn't believe in Jesus Christ. He said, but there wasn't a Christ for me to meet in person. He said he had to come to understand that the Christ consciousness does not have so much to do with a given historical personality as it does this universal consciousness, which is the Christhood, and that Christ consciousness is what Jesus embodied in a unique way. The Pope himself had to come to realize that on the other side. Now, wouldn't you love to have an experience like that, Garnet?
Yeah, I would actually, but I'd have to disagree with what John Paul II found, and maybe it was deliberately designed to tailored to meet his psyche and what he believed in, and maybe there was some lesson there for him. I have actually met Jesus Christ on the spirit side, so or at least someone who embodied themselves to appear to be Jesus Christ and identified himself as such, and it appeared to me as a man depicted much like how the paintings and other illustrations through the centuries have depicted him. So it looked very similar. May have been for my benefit only, I don't know, but I did meet someone who identified as Jesus Christ. So two different experiences. It's hard to explain why the Pope didn't get to see Jesus in person like I did. Maybe he has now. Maybe there was some reason that they wanted him to see perhaps a much bigger picture. Maybe I was being spoon-fed an image that I could identify with, and that's why it appeared to me as a man. Hard to know. I mean, there's so many mysteries over there that I've only explored the tip of the iceberg.
Garnet, thank you for saying that, because as you have just briefly pointed out, there are so many possibilities. And I think that on this side with fairly limited thinking, we don't really know what is happening in the spirit world or what's happening in another dimension when people have either a psychic ability or a mediumistic ability. They can get a sense. They can see it from their perspective. They can feel it. They can hear it. They can sense it and what is going on. But nobody knows everything about it. And so when you're saying, well, it could have been this, or it could have been that, or it could have been something else, I think you are exactly right. I think that the unseen world of which you have had an experience is so complicated and so vast that we are only given a small piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. Does that make sense in your thinking?
It totally, Suzanne. It totally does. And I think we get spoon-fed pieces here and there based upon what we're capable of digesting and absorbing, and they don't want to overwhelm us. And so we get small pieces of it. Certainly not the whole picture. We will get the whole picture when we get over there. But while we're here, it's just we get bits and pieces from mediums or from dreams or whatever, and that's just designed to make sure that we can understand what we're seeing without getting overwhelmed. Because if you get overwhelmed, then everything's lost. You sort of throw up your hands and give up and say, well, none of this makes any sense. So that's how it sort of plays out most of the time.
Recently, I stayed up too late at night to watch a movie that I had seen only once before, and the movie's called Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey.
That's such a good movie.
You'd like that too?
It's a great movie.
Well, it was on till 2 a.m., and I stayed up all the way till 2 a.m. to finish it, which left me tired the next day.
Sometimes you just gotta sacrifice, Suzanne.
You gotta. But what you're talking about, Garnet, is affirmed in that movie when Jodie Foster has this experience of going through a wormhole, going to another planet, and who does she run into but her father? And she's so delighted and thrilled to see her father until she realizes that everything she was looking at was not real. And she says to this voice, who is in the guise of her father, "This isn't real." And he said, "We had to present it in a way that you would understand it." And so there was a consciousness there, but she couldn't possibly have accepted that conscious being looking in a way that maybe she couldn't recognize as a bug or a light or something grotesque or something that would have distracted her so much from the message that she would have been scared. So instead, she was presented an idea, and he said he got it from her psychically, that he took the pictures of her father and created an image of her father so that she would be able to ask the questions that she wanted to ask. And so that's kind of like what you're saying when you say what we're able to perceive is spoon-fed to us in a way that we can accept it, because I think there is so much in the universe that is so far beyond our comprehension. We like to think that we're smart and we really get how things are, but we really don't, do we? Especially when, like you have had a glimpse of the other side, and then what happens to your reality on this side, Garnet?
Yeah, no, entirely, Suzanne, and I actually love that movie, Contact. I remember it very well. I haven't watched it recently, but that's exactly. I mean, the analogy there was very much what we see now between Earth and the spirit side. When I fully think that when I go to the spirit side with Albert, I'm shown what they think that I need to see that will make me comfortable and not distraught or upset. So I think that's what I see, and that happens to everyone. People who have NDEs, they will see their loved ones or their family, or if they're Christian, they might see an image of Jesus Christ, or if they're Muslim, they might see Muhammad. So these things are initially tailored to make sure that we can be comfortable with where we are and not overly distressed. And so that happens a lot. And when I went over to my first trip to the spirit side, and I had a meeting with my deceased relatives, it was like my mother and father, brother, and aunts, uncles, and grandparents who had predeceased me, and they all appeared to me sort of in the prime of their life kind of vision, but I could clearly recognize them, and it was there to make sure that I felt very comfortable when I first crossed over, and that was confirmation to me that people don't die, their souls cross over. And everyone gets a sort of a different welcoming party when they cross over or when they have an NDE. And it's all designed to make sure that we're very comfortable with what we see. We're not frightened, and we can take it all in and receive it with full confirmation that this is what's really happening. So it's different for everyone, and eventually I think when we do cross over, then gradually we'll be able to see more and more of the whole picture, because then we will understand what's going on and we won't need to be spoon-fed anymore. But right now, that's what happens.
Well, we might see a little bit more, but I don't think anybody sees the whole picture, even on the other side. You don't think you get a peek at the entire puzzle, do you, Garnet?
Yeah, that I'm not sure of, because when I've been over there, they've been giving me just small pieces of it, because I'm still sort of incarnated on Earth, haven't crossed over. So I can't say for sure if we get the whole picture or just more of it. Something I'm looking forward to finding out when I do cross over. But and that has not been revealed to me by Albert. He doesn't say that we'll understand totally everything. He does say we'll understand some things better, like we'll understand the concept of no linear time. We'll understand sort of how life on Earth works and how people view the incarnations and the interactions and what happens when you get back. So some of those things he said clearly I will understand better, but he's never said I'll get the whole picture. So that's a mystery to me as well.
I think this would be a good time for us to take our first break, because I'm kind of simmering some ideas. Metaphysical Q&A is a wonderful concept, but it's such a wide open field that you pretty much can just go in any direction, and at the end you stop and turn around and go home. And when we do that with Garnet, it's always a rewarding experience, because we always know there's more to be said next time. Certainly there's a lot more to be said on the other side of a short break. Let's take a couple of minutes and then come back, and we will continue our discussion with Garnet Schulhauser, our honored guest of this hour. Always fun when he joins us. We are Mantz and Mitchell, and you are tuned in to Seattle's home of Alternative Talk, AM 1150. We'll be right back.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.
Hello, my name is Marie Manucheri. I'm an energy intuitive, author, and host of Where Energy and Medicine Meet. During the show, I answer callers' questions, intuitively, of course, and provide invaluable guidance. I also interview others who I believe are on the leading edge of thought. Tune in on Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on 1150 a.m. in Seattle, or live wherever you are at energyintuitive.com.
When you look at me, you might see my tremor,
my lack of facial expression,
a person with Parkinson's disease,
but you may not see that I have trouble sleeping,
that no two treatment plans are the same.
I was diagnosed at 65.
37, earlier than most.
But if you look closer,
you'll see
a warrior mom,
an endurance athlete, someone who is still dancing.
Someone with a lot of fight.
Every 9 minutes, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
And every one of them can turn to the American Parkinson Disease Association for education,
for community,
for support.
Look closer.
And you'll see
my resolve,
my determination, my spirit
is unshakable.
Visit apdaparkinson.org to learn more and show your support today.
Hi, this is Susan Harmon, inviting you to join me every Friday, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific Time, for the Susan Harmon Hour. I'm always curious, and I enjoy discussing a wide array of interesting and provocative subjects with fascinating and erudite guests. If you're looking for grounded authenticity with a twist, you'll want to join us for a fast-moving and informative hour right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
An alternative to everything else on your radio dial. Alternative Talk 1150.
Anybody want to guess? That's from now the late, great Roy Clark. That's some picking. Really amazing. So we lost Roy Clark, and when I was growing up, it was Hee Haw. But he's known for other things in a far more dignified way.
I guess he played guitar too.
He could play a little bit.
I used to watch
him
on Hee Haw. I wasn't a huge fan of Hee Haw, but I'd tune it in. Mostly I was laughing at people, not with them.
It was corn pone.
I know. I thought, how ridiculous. So I'd look at it for a few minutes and turn it off. And I do remember him from that. But, I guess he did a little picking on the guitar, too.
Yes, it turns out. Now Garnet's going to tell us, don't you badmouth Hee Haw. That got me through law school. So Garnet Schulhauser is with us. We're doing some metaphysical Q&A, which is just a part of our broadcast that has become something of a tradition with us. We enjoy it, and never more so than when we keep company with Garnet Schulhauser. Before, I was just trying to rack my brain a little bit, thinking, okay, other questions, where can we go with this? There's just so many directions to travel. Let me mention, and this is, they're pertinent to what we were discussing just before the break, this idea of perception and reality, linear time, and what you've learned from your visits to the other side. So a great privilege which I have not consciously had, at least not in this incarnation. And if it involved a near-death experience, I think I would just pass on that because I'm a scaredy cat. But if you get the opportunity to peer into the other side, through the curtain, as it were, that would be extraordinary by any definition. Garnet, I wanted to say that I'm aware, without being able to quote him directly, that Albert Einstein himself was of the opinion that realities, the perceptual reality of the human species that even the greatest scientists can look at, is an illusion, but a very persistent one. And so there is a way in which we frame reality. And I wonder, well, what about my state of mind? I mean, I know what it is to be drunk. I know what it is to be high. I know what it is to be absolutely stone cold sober and yet feeling a tremendous weight of depression. I know what it is to laugh uproariously and to grieve. All of those things are states of reality that entail perception, and you have a perception field. So when I look at that, I go, well, what is reality at any given moment, and how can I avoid making that a subjective experience? Well, what is, people are looking, we just talked about the movie Contact. If you're looking for life in another world, within our galaxy, beyond our galaxy, wherever it may be, we're looking for sentient life. And if we had the personal experience of it, for example, Garnet, how would you go about proving it? Because in the movie, the scientist couldn't prove it. She had to allow for the fact that it might just be a big hallucination, and people with their own agendas were determined to make that the public perception, that this was all a hallucination, all an illusion, and yet you're led to believe by the end of the movie that, well, I don't know, maybe and maybe not. And so when we look at reality, at any given point in time, in space, as you've been shown, Garnet, with all of your spiritual work, at any given point, where are you going? Where do you find yourself, and where is the destination?
Well, I know the destination is. The destination is we all, when our physical bodies die, we all go back to the spirit side. Spirit side is the true reality. That's what's really happening. And when you get there, according to Albert, you can look at what's happening on Earth or other planets. You can get to see that there are very advanced alien races in our universe, many of them much more advanced than humans. And so you get to see the true picture from that perspective. While we're here on Earth, our perception is very much colored by our emotions. Are we happy? Are we sad? Are we depressed? Are we high? Whatever. And so that's how our reality is affected to a large degree. And then in terms of the bad things that happen on our planet, that's basically a function of someone's negative emotions like anger, fear, hate, greed, getting out of control and basically ruling their lives. And that's happened over and over through mankind's history, happens today all the time with all the violence, mass shootings, wars. And so our emotions not only affect our perception, but in reality they actually change things that are happening, the circumstances on our planet. And in terms of how can we prove that there's alien life on other planets, very intelligent, how can we prove that? We can't today, unless they show up, land one of their crafts somewhere on the White House lawn and say, here we are, and we've come to visit you guys, and then there would be proof. But other than that, you can't prove it. I mean, I can't prove to anyone that I've traveled to the spirit side or traveled astrally to other planets. Can't do that. And so at best, people are going to have to take it on faith that what I'm telling them is the truth, what I've seen. They can believe it or not believe it, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change things. As Albert has said, what people believe when they're incarnated on Earth does not in any way affect where they end up going when their bodies die, because we all go back to the same place. So you can believe whatever you like, and your beliefs do not affect where you go. They may affect what happens to you on Earth, but they don't affect where you go when your physical bodies die.
Garnet, someone may be tuned in hearing you for the first time, and when they hear you say Albert after I mentioned Einstein, they may think that you're talking about Albert Einstein, and we know that you're not. So a little bit about Albert, please. Your Albert.
Yeah, my Albert is one of my spirit guides. I first met him when I was still practicing law, walking down the street one day, and a homeless man jumped out in front of me. To make a long story short, I ended up having a conversation with him. He said that his name was Albert. He was one of my spirit guides in disguise, and he'd come to answer my questions and give me the revelations that he wanted me to write about in my book so that everyone would have access to them. So Albert's been one of my spirit guides from day one, and he's a very wise guy, and he's taken me on a number of astral trips to see things, talk to some wise and famous people, and I've written about him in our books. And so Albert's sort of like he's my mainstay. He's the guy that has enlightened me and has guided me, throughout my life and continues to do so.
Well, thank you for that little bit of an explanation so people know who Albert is, because there's more than one Albert we're talking about here. I took several notes while you were talking, Garnet, because there's like several places that I feel I can go. One of the things you were talking about is affecting the earth with our emotions and our beliefs. We're creating our reality through our emotions. We've heard this before, so people shouldn't have too much of a disagreement about that. If you are grieving, your reality has to do with sadness, and if there are things occurring that you really like and you're really happy about, then that reality looks a whole lot better. What I'm wondering about is we have heard from mediums before that in order to connect with the spirit world, that we have to raise our vibration. And then on the other side, they have to lower their vibration in order to make that connection. And with the idea that not only are there absolutely wonderful things occurring on a daily basis everywhere, there's also a lot of things that people are not happy experiencing, a lot of reality that is cruel, unjust, and seems like it shouldn't be. And I'm wondering if you think that it's necessary that we experience all of it, or do you think there is a way for us to actually create that reality consciously and shift how the planet is so that we are not stuck with so much negativity? What is your take on that?
Oh, we absolutely can, and it's no secret, really. Albert has mentioned to me many times. He said, to stifle the violence and some of the awful things that happen on our planet, happen every day. It's a matter of making a conscious effort for everyone to stifle their negative emotions. The fear, anger, hate, greed, judgment. Stifle those whenever those emotions flare up, and then fully embrace love, compassion, and forgiveness. And to the extent that we fully embrace love and compassion, we raise our vibrations. And to the extent we raise our vibrations, we help other people raise their vibrations, and that gets us into a closer connection with spirit, with the ultimate hope that someday we can raise our vibrations high enough that we will end up in what they call the New Earth, which I'm sure you've heard of before, where there's really no violence, no negative emotions. It's a very lovely kind of society that that lives in peace and harmony. And so that's the ultimate goal for humans, to try to raise their vibrations high enough to get there. And the things that hold us back are the negative emotions that happen to us every day, and it's really an effort we have to make an effort to try to stifle them and focus on positive things. And if we do that, we can change our world.
Let me ask you yet another out of the blue type question, Garnet, and that is, this is getting to be a problem worldwide. If a person is caught in the throes of dementia, which is understood to be a progressively deteriorating and disabling disease, you become dysfunctional in so many ways. What is the vibration, and at what frequency does someone with dementia operate, if they can be said to be operating at all, as opposed to just continuing to breathe?
Well, Albert says that in many cases where people are declared mentally unfit, or they're suffering from dementia or whatever, he says in many cases they seem to be that way to us, but in reality, he says they're often, they found an opening where they can peer into other dimensions, into other worlds, and so often they're when they're not with us, they're actually looking at things that are happening in other dimensions, having conversations with other beings, perhaps peering into the spirit world, and so that's taking their focus, and they basically then don't really pay any attention to their physical needs or their bodily functions, and so they need help in that regard. But he says, they may well be very much enjoying their existence, one that we can't perceive with them, but they are very much enjoying where they are, and they know that when their physical body dies, they'll be released in a way they'll go to what they've been watching and perceiving. So it could be very different from what we think, where you think, well, there's somebody with dementia, and the poor guy is, what an awful life. He may well be very much enjoying himself in a very different way.
In that case, Garnet, would you just say that they're not sharing the reality that so many of us are sharing?
Yeah, they're not sharing it, and they're not sure how to share it. I mean, to them, it's like, if I start talking about these things, that's just going to confirm to the doctors that I really am crazy, and so they don't do that, and in another way, it'd be pretty hard for them to describe what they're seeing, what they're perceiving, because it's beyond the human language. It's so they don't even try for the most part, but they are living in their own little world, watching what's going on in other dimensions and seeing what's going on to some degree on the spirit side.
It's fascinating.
Well, it is, and it makes me, that's hopeful. It certainly makes me feel better about the fact that so many people are in the grip of this disease or complex of diseases. But also, I wonder if it isn't difficult for them and frustrating in normal human terms. Is it frustrating for them to peer into another dimension, into the spirit world perhaps, and yet they're lugging along this body that reduces their normative approach to living down to the level of a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old, where they can't clothe themselves, they can't feed themselves. If some part of them is aware of so much more going on in the universe, my heart goes out to them, because until they shed the shell of their bodies, they can't go where they can now see in this special way.
Exactly, and it is frustrating for them. I mean, to be quite honest, if everyone on Earth could see in a clearer picture what happens on the spirit side and what happens when their physical bodies die, we'd all be frustrated that we have to lug around these human bodies for a while, and actually there would be more people taking their own lives, because it's like, I don't want to wait anymore. I want to get back to to the good place where things are really good and I have a better understanding. And so thankfully, we don't get to see that picture, because more of us would end up just taking our own lives and cutting it short. So these people with the mental disabilities, they're frustrated at their body that they have to lug around. They want to go to where they've been viewing the different dimensions, the spirit side, but they recognize that they just have to play it out, let their bodies die in normal course. In the meantime, they're not really suffering. I mean, they're not really terribly upset that they can't dress themselves or feed themselves. that's just sort of a minor annoyance. It's not a big deal for them because they're enjoying what they're seeing when they're sitting there in a chair and staring at a blank wall. They're not really staring at a blank wall. They're seeing another dimension, and they quite enjoy it.
It's fascinating in another way. I'm trying to look at it from another angle. Many years ago, I'm going to say this was in the early to mid 1990s, we had this epidemic of teen suicides. And I'm not saying it's not a problem today, but there was a real epidemic going on a while back. And I had a very psychic friend of mine. She was extraordinary at giving readings, not mediumistic, though she could do that, but in terms of just operating from the psychic dimension and working with tarot cards. She wasn't even a tarot card reader, but she would work with them to stimulate this other extrasensory perception she had. It was fascinating to watch her. And we got onto the subject of teen suicides. And she said, I looked into this. I've asked my guides. I've asked for insight into why this is going on. It's such a terrible problem. And she said, what they are showing me is that young people, teenagers, are taking their lives now, not nearly as much out of despair, out of hopelessness, which you would think would be the case. They're doing it, she said, because they want to be young, children or teens in the coming generation. In another 10 years or so, they want to be young then because of what is coming into the world. And I thought, well, now that is the strangest explanation I've ever heard. And I just went, I'm going to have to pay attention to that. Well, there was no way I could do that until we came to 10, 12 years later. What happened? What happened was an explosion in popular culture. So if I reason my way back, and if there's any validity to this, those young people took their lives and came right back in, if that's a choice, in order to be kids when Harry Potter shows up, when the Twilight series shows up, when movies with all this CGI, this magical world shows up, when gaming itself exponentiates creatively and its popularity apace. They were young in order to jump into that in a way which the only thing I can do by way of analogy, Garnet, is to say, if I were going to commit suicide in the early to mid 1950s, and I'm a young person and I take my life, I want to be a kid when the Beatles show up because I sure wouldn't want to miss Beatlemania. And I was born in 1954. Some of my earliest, most vivid memories are of watching the Beatles, listening to the Beatles, absorbing Beatlemania in a way that's in my DNA. But if you're born in 1983 or something, you know the Beatles as pop culture history. You may even like their music, but you weren't there. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. For those people to be actually have that vision of themselves in terms of, well, I'm incarnating here, and when my life ends here, I'm going back, and then I can choose where to come again. And for them to go through that scenario, understand it, and then have the vision that they want to be a child in some decades later. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's not something that normally humans are attuned with. So I'm not sure how that would happen. I mean, it's entirely possible, but they must have been getting some really great visions and messages from their guides, giving them this understanding of how the whole thing works. Because in my experience, most teenagers, aren't anywhere near that sort of level of understanding. Maybe they had a religion, they're probably not spiritual. And back in those days when I was a teenager, I wasn't thinking about those things. So if these children are basically getting that sort of a vision ahead of time, that understanding of how the cycle works, then that's just amazing. And if that's the reason for the suicide, then that's a better reason than just giving up out of despair because you don't like the cards you were dealt, even though you were the one who dealt the cards to yourself. But that's how most suicides end up, just because of people giving up too many challenges and I want out of here. But if they did it for that what we could call a positive reason, that's just amazing. And I'd never heard that before, Gary, but I'm very interested to hear it.
And, we kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier, Garnet, and that is that there are so many possible explanations. And when we find one that resonates with us, we say, okay, well, that must be it. That fits. That makes sense to me. And we kind of just stay with that. It makes sense that, young people are very despairing. So, yeah, I can understand they decided to leave the planet because of their unhappiness. But then you look at another potential explanation, which is very different. And the other thing that we have heard before from mediums is that sometimes children will feel as though they fulfilled what they intended to do as their life path at an early age, something to do with their biological families or something to do with their interactions here where they said, okay, I got done what I came to do, so I guess I can go back to the spirit world now. And I've always found that equally intriguing, that their mission is fulfilled, even though it seems at an early age. And to most of us, we want to see people have long lives, that is the ideal, to have a nice long life. But for some people, that may not be why they came here. Maybe they just wanted a shorter life.
Exactly. And it happens all the time, according to Albert, is that it's not everyone's desire to live to be 85, and that sometimes they will pick out a life plan where they can hit all their challenges sort of early on, and by the time they hit 20 or 15 or whatever it is, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And go back to the spirit side of it, plan my next life. It's also true that sometimes people with a very short life are here primarily to help others with their journeys, and so they may.
Yes.
So a young person may say, okay, my mom and dad on Earth need to have to go through the challenge of having a youngster, a teenager, die at an early age, because that's a challenge for them, and so I will volunteer to go into their lives as that child and die at an early age so that I can set up the test challenge for my parents. So that happens a lot as well. And so you can never say when a young child, say a 6-year-old, dies tragically in a car accident, everyone wants to say, well, what a shame, they had their whole life ahead of them. But the soul that was in that child, they may have done it just to serve as a lesson for their parents, to see how their parents would handle losing a child, or they may have just come here for a very short little lesson for themselves, and after 6 years, it's okay, I'm done with my life plan, let's go back. And so it could be any of those reasons.
And it doesn't lessen the grieving in any way for the people who are left behind. And it doesn't matter at what point where you pass, in what decade of your life, they still have people here who are very sorry to see you go. Because they're here and you're not. We need to take our second break of this hour. We are talking with Garnet Schulhauser, a metaphysical Q&A today. We'll take our second break, and when we come back, more with Garnet. And thank you for listening to Mantz and Mitchell on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Preceding audio was via a Skype call.
Staying connected with Gary Mantz and Suzanne Mitchell is easy. Just go to mantzandmitchell.com for the latest info on topics and guests. Friend Gary Mantz and Suzanne Mitchell on their Facebook pages and like the Mantz and Mitchell show page at facebook.com/mantzandmitchell. If you're on Twitter, share a follow with Gary and Suzanne at Mantz Mitchell. Join Gary and Suzanne Friday and Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. for an unusual show that covers everything from personal growth to the paranormal.
Here's an amazing act. Here's a tremendous act. Here's a startling act. The amazing, the thrilling, the greatest, spectacular, incredible, exciting, wonderful, world fame, most unusual novelty act.
The home of the A-team of Alternative Talk is mantzandmitchell.com. Heard right here on Alternative Talk 1150 AM or streaming live from your computer anywhere.
It's a great time of year to be outdoors, fishing in a local stream, splashing through a creek. We all assume these waters are safe and clean, but for most streams, no one knows for sure. That's a problem we can do something about. The Isaac Walton League of America can help us get started, from stream cleanups with friends to simple water quality tests designed for volunteers like you and me. The League has been helping community volunteers find and fix water quality problems for almost 50 years with simple tools that produce results you can use to test streams for pollution, to get your friends and neighbors involved, and to help protect streams where we enjoy the outdoors. To get started, visit iwla.org today. That's iwla.org.
On Friday, Mantz and Mitchell welcome back paranormal author Garnet Schulhauser for a fascinating hour of metaphysical Q&A.
On Saturday, Louisa Oakley Green joins us. She's the psychic bystander whose husband got her interested in the goings-on of the unseen world.
Bringing you fascinating talk since 2007.
We are Mantz and Mitchell, Friday and Saturday mornings at 10 on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Find out the latest about your favorite shows on Alternative Talk 1150. Check out 1150kknw.com.
Welcome back to Mantz and Mitchell, and our guest this hour, Garnet Schulhauser. Are you laughing at Bob Dylan, Gary?
I love Bob Dylan as an artist. He's an all-time master, and I'm laughing because if you took away those fine lyrics, and of all his songs, I think those are some of my favorite lyrics of his, you could substitute handing him a phone book, So sat down there, looked for a plumber, found a mortician instead. Looked at my life, looked at the number, found out I was dead. That's just whatever it is. He's just going to sing it with the same voice. So we don't play a lot of Bob Dylan on this show. Once in a while, we just feel like, let's get folksy and do that, and he does it like no one else. And Garnet Schulhauser is unique in his way. Maybe you want to get up close and personal with him. Garnet, this is what we call the marketing piece. So please tell our good listeners how they can get in touch with you and what you have to offer.
Okay, best way to get in touch with me is through my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com. That's hard to remember, but if they Google any of my book titles like Dancing on a Stamp, they can get there. I've written 4 books about my dialogue and astral travels with my spirit guide Albert: Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirit, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, and the latest one, Dance of Eternal Rapture. And these are all available on all the popular online stores like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and many others. And there are buy links on my website where you can just sort of click on whichever store you want, and it gets right to the place where you can buy my books. My website has information on all the books. You can download a free excerpt. You can watch a book video. And you can also, on my website, listen to the recordings of all of my previous radio shows. And this is radio show number 145 for me. And you can also dial into my social media sites like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. And on my YouTube channel, I post all the radio shows and all the interviews I've done, all the speaking engagements that I've been speaking at, and they're all there, so you can listen to them at your leisure. And my email address is on my website. If they have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to hear from them.
Thank you. That was very complete. Not everybody does it that well, so thank you, Garnet.
There's something so mysterious about the greats of popular culture who die young, and I know you're aware of this, but I don't know if anyone's ever explained it to you, Albert or otherwise. But Garnet, when I think of some of the pop culture greats in my early years, yes, and then far more recently, look at the year 27 in the lives of people like Jimi Hendrix, Seattle guy there, and Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, and far more recently, Amy Winehouse, brilliant stars that exploded across the sky, illuminated the world, and then winked out or went out, tragically at age 27. And you're starting to get me convinced here, Garnet, that there are people who really never intended when they were planning their lives to live a long time. They wanted to do more living than we can imagine or experience in a compressed time frame.
That's absolutely right, and that can happen quite often because we're all free to sort of craft our own life plans. And as I said, not everyone wants to live to be 85. For some people, it's like I'm gonna live to be 27. I'm gonna pack a lot of stuff in those years, and then I'm gonna exit and go back, and then I'll see where I go next. And so that happens often. And when you name some of these pop stars, it could very well be that that's what happened. And I hope for their sake that is what happened, rather than some accident out of the blue that sort of took them out before they were ready to go. But 27 years is you can pack a lot of stuff into 27 years. In some cases, you can do more in 27 years, depending on the person, than another person can do in 85 years. It just depends on how active you are and how much you enjoy life and how much you pack into it.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I do see people kind of pacing themselves, feeling like they got plenty of time. And, then all of a sudden you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and, you're still thinking, I got plenty of time. You don't know.
You never know.
Yeah.
What are you doing with the time that you have left?
You're not allowed to know, actually.
Right.
Sorry, Gary?
I was just saying, what are you doing with the time you have left, whoever you are?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you're not allowed to know when you're going to make your exit, even though your soul has got all this planned out beforehand. That's just one of the big mysteries of life. So, if you're sitting here, I'm 67, I have no idea whether I might get hit by a bus next week, or maybe I'll live to be 85, I have no idea. But you have to sort of plan it as though you're going to carry on and try to make the best of your life at no matter what stage. And a lot of people, when they retire, it's sort of like, okay, now what do I do? Well, we should all have some sort of a plan to try to live a fulfilled life in whatever direction we want to go. But you can't just sort of give up and sit on the park bench feeding pigeons every day. I think you have to really do something positive in whatever direction you think that you want to go.
I like that. That's good advice.
That's conscious living. And I note, for example, this week we lost Stan Lee. What a marvelously inventive, yes, as in Marvel Comics. They're an inventive mind. He was a genius, and he lived to be 95. And I said, thank you, sir, for all your creations. And no, thank you. I don't want to live to be 95. You can't say of someone like that, he left us too soon. Well, if you want to stick around to be 100, okay. But I'm with you on that, Garnet. This idea of live to 85, that's a benchmark for a lot of people. If I make it to 85, I guess I'm okay, especially if I'm in reasonably good repair between now and then. But getting to a very aged point in life is not a goal in and of itself for some of us. We want to live the quality, even if, as it were, we had to sacrifice longevity or great longevity in the process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. From my perspective, I'd rather, die at 80 with most of my physical faculties still in place than go another 5 years and be in a wheelchair with tubes sticking out of my body. I'd rather go out at a high point rather than just stretch it out for the sake of stretching it out. So, it sounds like you have the same mindset, Gary, and I think a lot of people do. But of course, we don't really know when our physical faculties will disappear. They do slowly over time, but all of a sudden they could go in a big rush if you have a stroke or something, and then bango, you're sitting there and confined to a wheelchair. So that's not the way I want to go, but I don't really have the final say over that.
No, nor do any of us. But in our last 2 minutes, I will say Suzanne Mitchell has a pretty good perspective on all that. Now, see, you're a Canadian, so you have a different frame of reference when we talk about healthcare and finances. Yeah, it's different for you than it is for most Americans. But Suzanne likes to remind me that people will go through a fortune, most of their life savings, just staying alive in the last year or two of their existence.
That has statistically been shown already.
And certainly among Americans. Now in Canada, it's done a bit differently and much better than we do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I can certainly understand that. You're right; it doesn't happen in Canada because we have state health care for everyone, and so you don't, unless you had some rare disease that wasn't covered by our plan. You could be in the hospital for the last 6 months of your life on all kinds of drugs and different procedures, and it doesn't cost you anything. So that's the good part of it. We're not faced with that. But, it just shows you that in your example of people spending a bunch of money in the last to live another year, It's just how humans tend to try to cling to life, and they just don't realize that they're either uncertain about what happens when they die, don't know where they're going to go, and so they want to cling to what they know. The devil that they know is life as a human on Earth, and so it's really unfortunate. It'd be great if those people could get the comfort of seeing truly where they're going to go, and then they would not fight it. They would say, okay, well, it's time to go, and I'm happy to go because it's way better over there than it is here on Earth.
And with that, we will say thank you, Garnet Schulhauser, for today's metaphysical Q&A.
We can't wait to do it again. That's great.
Great A's to our Q's.
That's right. We'll get out that way, and then we'll do some of this in person. I think that would be just outstanding. Thank you so much, Garnet.
Yeah, perfect. Love to see you guys, and hope to be on the show again, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
You will be for sure. Coming up tomorrow, we have our friend who hasn't been on for a while. She's peered into the other side, Louisa
Oakley Green. So join us again tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Have a great weekend, everyone.